Okay, good afternoon, everybody. In this fine sunny day, I call this meeting to order. The FORA Use Authority Board of Directors regular meeting is Friday, March 15th, 3:30. If we could have roll call, please.
City of Carmel by the Sea, Mayor Burnett. City of Delray Oaks, Mayor Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Morton. Here. City of Monterey, Councilmember Selfridge. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Potter. Monterey County Supervisor Salinas. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. Here. City of Pacific Grove, Mayor Camp. Here. City of Salinas, Mayor Gunter. Here. City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Rubio. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby. Here. 20th Congressional District, Sonia Arndt. 17th State Senate District, Nicole Charles. 29th State Assembly District, Erica Parker. University of California, Graham Bice. California State University, Eduardo Ochoa. Monterey Peninsula College, Walter Tribley. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Dan Alpert Jr. Monterey Salinas Transit, Hunter Harvath. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale. United States Army, Colonel Clark. Fort Ord BRAC Office, Bill Collins. Marina Coast Water District, Director Moore. Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Lena.
And,
we'll soon be moving
into
a closed session. In closed session, we'll have conference with our legal counsel on existing litigation, Government Code 54956.9 Alpha 4 cases. Keep Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reassessment Authority case numbers M114961, M116438, and M119217. Also, we'll be discussing the City of Marina versus Fort Ord Reassessment Authority case number M118566. We will also have a conference with our legal counsel, anticipated litigation under Government Code 54956.9B, 2 cases there, and a Public Employee and Performance Evaluation Authority Council, Government Code 54957. Prior to going to closed session, is there any member of the public that would wish to provide a public comment with regard to any of these cases we're going to closed session? No public comment whatsoever? You have a chance to say... Yes, that would be closed session. If you have public comment, you may do that now, Jane.
I do.
Thank you.
I'm Jane Haynes. I'm commenting on, for myself, but I'm commenting on Sierra Club's letter that regarding Authority Council, in which it says that, my timer, that Authority Council is currently preventing FORA from being a responsive and accountable institution. FORA cannot be responsive and accountable institution until it knows how it has not been one. The staff report at page 91 illustrates this. First, there's no mention in that staff report of a breach of a settlement agreement. There's no mention of Sierra Club's March 5 letter that was written after we discovered that there were 141 breaches, word changes. Only the February 14 letter, and at which time we only knew about one. There's no mention in the staff report that the highlighted sections on pages 105, 106, which are important sections, will be eliminated by this action. There's no mention that FORA staff could try and work with Sierra Club in the next few weeks and get these highlighted sections, an agreement, bring these highlighted sections back in. And a similar thing happened a little over a year ago with respect to another breach of the settlement agreement, which my guess is you don't even know about. It had to do with deed restrictions. It took Sierra Club longer than it should have to get the deed restrictions required by the settlement agreement to be put on transferred lands. FORA has never acknowledged that FORA breached the settlement agreement by that, but we didn't say anything because it was being remedied. The FORA's done a good job of getting those deed restrictions back on, but the fact is that it never acknowledged that that the settlement agreement had been breached, and my guess is that the board wasn't aware of it. So I'm convinced that FORA cannot be a responsible and accountable institution until it knows how it has not been one. And I think that the instances that I've just told you illustrate that. And so I hope that beginning Monday, the present Authority Council is no longer in a position to influence FORA.
Thank you, Jane. Any other member of the public wish to address the board with regard to any of the items on closed session? Okay, seeing none, closed session is now closed. We will be adjourning an open session, reconvening in closed session. Thank you very much. We'll be gone for about half an hour. Okay, thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Okay, we're reconvening an open session. If our attorney counsel would make the announcement of action taken in closed session, please.
The board heard and advised counsel about the litigation matters that are in the agenda and took no reportable action. On the Authority Council personnel question that's on the agenda is item 2C. Was announced that Authority Council will be leaving in about 5 months and transferring. This is something that has been talked about for the last 6 months approximately, and we'll be transferring responsibility to John Giffen and the firm of Kennedy, Archer, and Giffen. Is that enough?
Thank you very much. I would ask Mayor Dave Pendergrass if he would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you, Dave. For acknowledgements, announcements...
I'm sorry, I just have to note, sure. I don't believe that the report was an accurate report.
Go, please.
I thought you said no more than 5 months, and then in the report you said 5 months.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're correct. No more than... It was no more than 6 months, and I'm not exactly sure when that 6-month period started, but I stand corrected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing it up. Okay, a couple things. We have a number of the board members here that have to leave early, about 5 o'clock or shortly thereafter. Unfortunately, we're going to try and speed through the agenda, but we're not going to be... everybody will get a chance to comment where it's appropriate for comments and so forth. Because of that, we're going to be moving for the old business, the order of old business. The 7B, the CIP review, is basically information. So we have the board here as long as possible and that we don't lose our quorum. We're going to be moving that, 7B, 1 and 2 will be moved to the end of 7. And then for, it was also brought out under 8, new business. It makes more sense for B, the Forward Authority Master Resolution Amendments, to come before A, which is the Consistency Determination Seaside Local Coastal Program. So we're going to go ahead and make that change also. I'd like to make an announcement, first of all, that congratulations to Mayor Dave Pendergrass. He got Public Official of the Year from the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. It was a big celebration on Saturday evening. It's well deserved, Dave. Good job on that. Okay, Michael, do you have some announcements?
Yes.
Yes, Chair Edelin, just as is noted on the agenda that there toward prevailing wage conference, we've mentioned this a couple of times at board meetings and at other meetings in the last several weeks, but the dates are May 2nd and 3rd that we are currently working on. We want to make sure that our jurisdictions and others are aware of the conference because we intend to look at all sides of the prevailing wage issue. Hopefully we'll have active participation from the labor community as well as the jurisdictions as well as public officials from outside the area, particularly Sacramento, and especially our developer partners as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michael. Next on the agenda, consent agenda, 6A and B. Any member of the board wish to pull any items for questions or discussion? Seeing none, any member of the public wish to pull any items for discussion or questions whatsoever? Seeing none, back to the board.
Move approval.
Okay, we have a motion from Mayor Rubio for approval and second from Mayor O'Connell. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Old business.
I'll abstain from February 15th. Thank you.
Okay. We are going to conduct the Executive Committee member-at-large election right now. We have two candidates. We have Supervisor Jane Parker and San City Mayor David Pendergrass were nominated for member-at-large. We've already had discussion by the public. We've already had discussion by the board. This is actually the third in a series of elections. We'll be doing this by roll call. There's no motion since we're just doing the election. Each member of the board that is allowed to vote will vote for either Supervisor Parker or Mayor Pendergrass. So, Lena, if you'd go through the roll call vote, please.
Mayor Camp,
Pendergrass.
Supervisor Salinas,
Pendergrass.
Mayor Gunter,
Pendergrass.
Mayor Rubio, Mayor Pendergrass, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell, Mayor Edelin,
Pendergrass.
Supervisor Potter, excuse me, Councilmember Selfridge, Mayor Burnett,
Parker.
Councilmember Morton, Parker, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby,
Pendergrass.
Supervisor Parker. Parker. I have 8 for Pendergrass and 5 for Parker.
Mayor Pendergrass wins the election. Congratulations. And I'd like to thank both of the candidates for a very honorable campaign. It was very honorable. No mudslinging or whatever. And actually, we had 2 outstanding candidates. I expect the supervisor to be on the inner sanctum here very, very shortly. I'm sure with all the hard work she does and so forth. Thank you. Yeah, it was an expensive election too. Okay, the next item on the agenda is authorize the executive officer to execute ICF International Contract Number 5. Michael?
Yes, Chair Edelin and members of the board, this would allow us to continue the research work that's required under this contract to study additional species that are recommended by California Department of Fish and Wildlife in order to complete the Habitat Conservation Plan. Your authorization will allow that work to be completed in time for the publication of the Habitat Conservation Plan.
Any questions by committee members? Seeing none, out to the public. Do we have any questions from members of the public? Yes.
Yes, this is Levon Stone, Evangelist Levon Stone, FORA Environmental Justice Network. I would like to know what funds you're talking about and how much money are we discussing? And you said to complete the habitat management plan. Is that plan here?
Habitat Conservation.
Well, whatever the name of it is it here? If we're discussing this plan, then I would like to know where it is and details. These meetings now are going a little too fast. If there's too much stuff on the agenda for us to really get a real understanding, at least for myself, then we need to put it on another agenda or do something because The public comments have been moved to the end of the meetings now, which means that when people have to leave early, it's like the public comments are not even important. So what are we doing?
If you have questions, if you'd outline the questions, and what will happen is after you're done, the staff will attempt to answer your questions. And we just wanted to see if you have questions, other members of the public. So it'll be an orderly way of going about answering the questions. So just give us a list of your questions.
Yeah.
And then if other people come up, we'll be able to answer it afterwards.
Okay, I've asked about 3 questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Michael, you want to try and answer those right now?
At the end.
Okay, any other questions by members of the public? Saying none?
Yes, Chair Edelin, for the members and members of the public as well as the members here of the board, we provided a full cost estimate for the Addendum 5 that's going to be required for the Habitat Conservation Plan in your packet. We also sent several tables that include the schedule for doing the work on the Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan. There's a number of things that are required under our agreement with ICF International, which was formerly Jones & Stokes. This particular firm has been doing habitat conservation studies and plans on the former Fort Ord for all of the conservation agencies and the Army and FORA as well. In this particular case, we're adding some items. I think bank swallows in particular is the issue that will need to be looked at. In terms of the actual numbers, in the board report it specifically indicates that this gives additional budget authority of about $40,000, of which a portion was already included in our annual budget, and which includes some reallocation of the existing contract and about $14,000 in additional contract authority. So today the number is about $14,000, I think, in additional authority.
Just one other comment, that the actual board packet for the agenda and all the attached materials is normally distributed about a week ahead of time. It's also on the website. If any member of the board or any member of the public reads any of the materials and doesn't understand what's going on, doesn't understand the acronyms, or doesn't know where the source documents are, a phone call to the staff of FORA or just coming down here, they'd be more than happy to help you ahead of time. It's kind of hard if you show up at the meeting and don't understand. We can't stop everything and explain it for just a couple people in the audience. So if you, okay, well, then if you get an opportunity, it's on the website a week in advance, and the FORA staff will try and get the packets out earlier in the future, I'm sure. Right, Michael? Always a week. Okay, a week in advance we'll try. Thank you very much. Okay, it's back to the board right now. Need a motion, please? This is for $40,000 additional.
I'll move the item.
Okay, Mayor Rubio, and the second is Mayor Gunter. And the motion itself is to authorize the executive officer to execute ICF International Contract Agreement not to exceed $40,000 in additional budget authority. Okay, any discussion at all on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Okay, next item is the consider FORA expense policies. Michael?
Yes, so Chair Edel and members of the board, this item has been reviewed by the special ad hoc committee that was appointed to review expense policies, our forensic auditor, our annual auditor, the executive committee on 3 different occasions, and the finance committee as well. And as a consequence, you have new policies. Ivana Bednarik will describe those policies in a brief detail.
Good afternoon, members of the board, members of the public. As the executive officer said, this process, is this working? This process already started last July when the FORA board formed an ad hoc committee comprising of the chair of the finance committee and the chair of the executive committee. The forensic auditors and the honor auditors were also involved, giving recommendation on how to improve FORA policies. Both audits were already completed. One on the forensic audit in September, the annual audit in July of 2013. even though the auditors did not find the current FORA policies to be wrong, they made several constructive recommendations how to improve them so that the policies can provide better guidance to overall expense practices and strengthen internal control. As a result of those recommendations and directions by the ad hoc committee, staff revised 2 policies, the travel policy and the expense reimbursement policy, and developed new cell phone policy. All 3 policies are included in the board packet as attachments 1, 2, and 3. The new policies provide clear guidance or guidelines regarding who approves the expenditures, the expense approval authority, who signs the checks, which expense items qualify as allowed or disallowed to be reimbursed or paid for. And they also identify form of payment or reimbursement. The policies, as the executive officer said, were discussed at the last executive committee meeting, and the committee recommends that the board adopt these policies. I don't know if the chair of the forensic committee or executive committee wants to add any comments.
Bill, did you want to add anything?
No, I think staff has really worked up a nice representation of our recommendations. Very pleased to see it. And I think we're on the right track with the policies we have in front of us.
Yeah, Mayor Camp put an awful lot of work into this. It went to the executive committee twice and was mulled over. It's gone to both auditors for FORA, and it's brought before the board right now. So any member of the board have any questions? Yes. Gail.
I just have a couple of comments that I wanted to indicate. First of all, the travel reimbursement guidelines, and I appreciate that this has been looked at, but there's just a couple questions that I have. Overnight lodging, if you travel 50 miles, you're entitled to overnight lodging. 50 miles is San Jose and back. And I think that is too lenient of a standard, that maybe for overnight lodging, maybe we should consider either what time you have to be at the meeting, or maybe it's 100 miles or more. But many of our constituents drive to San Jose every day, come home every day as commuter to their jobs. So I think that needs to be looked at. The other question that I have, and I think your employees on page 33 of your staff report, I think it's page 33, employees are to submit their proof, it's not 33, it's page 31. You have mandatory language for reimbursement of expenditures by employees by submitting, they must submit within 14 days for incurring. And earlier, for processing travel reimbursements on page 29, you have should be within 14 days. I think they should be consistent and both be mandatorily, they shall be or are to be submitted within 14 days, that needs to be cleared up. And the ineligible travel expenses, I'm glad you have traffic fines. You might also want to add parking violations, because those generally are not considered moving violations. But I truly think 50 miles is too short.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments by members of the board? Seeing none, out to the public. Any comments by members of the public? Okay, back to the board. Gail, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion that these would be adopted with the change to overnight lodging eligibility would be at 100 miles, and that the 14-day submission for reimbursement be mandatory.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do I see a second?
I'll second that. I would, with a possible further refinement, you had mentioned some kind of indication about when the meetings might begin or end as part of that. I know that's language in the county policies, so I would like to encourage us to include that as well, just for further clarity.
I'll accept the amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion with an amendment and a second. Any discussion? Yes.
if we take the county's language, which I think makes sense, then where does the 100 miles fall in there? I think 100 miles is a little bit too far. You know, that's a little too far to be asking some employee to go up to Sacramento or wherever it may be and then come back because you're 90 miles away. So at the end of the day, this is supposed to be reviewed by the executive committee. And I know before, you know, we tripped up in a couple places, but still, we need to be fair. So I support the county's language, but I don't know how that works with the 100 miles. So I would, well, if you would suggest that you're okay with something less than 100 miles, it may work out.
Maybe through the chair, maybe what the motion should say is that we appreciate all the great work that's gone in so far. These are a couple of areas that need to come back to us next month.
Okay, so the motion basically would be approving what we have now with addition, that additional ideas will be brought back next month for consideration through the executive committee.
A point of order,
On the
Mr.
ordinance.
Chair. Are we trying to finalize the decision prior to public input?
No,
just-
we asked for public input already.
Oh,
We
I'm
already
sorry.
had that.
My
So we're back,
apologies.
we're discussion on the motion right now. Yes, I will.
Yeah, I think we're making it a little bit tougher than it really is. If people have to, you know, travel, then they should be able to stay overnight if it's more appropriate to stay overnight. And I think supervisors, if they're supervising their folks well, will know if that's appropriate or not. And in terms of board members, I know people go back and forth to commute to work, but we're volunteers, and we're driving back and forth on our dime. So if we elect to stay over instead of driving back and driving up again in the morning, I think it's appropriate for us to be able to stay somewhere, not at the Ritz, but at least not have to drive back and forth.
Yes, Jason.
Yes, I've been doing some testing for the federal government in the schools last month, and the rule was if you went 100 miles or 2 hours, you were able to stay all night, or if you were consecutive days. So if you went on Tuesday and Wednesday, you would be allowed to stay over also. So maybe there's some government guidelines, and we also had guidelines of what price the motel could be that we stayed in. So maybe there's some government guidelines that will be an answer to this.
Jason?
I was simply going to observe if somebody might be able to track down the county policy while we continue through the rest of agenda items. We could continue it till later and try to get this resolved tonight. If we can't, then we could take another course of action.
Chair.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think that's the county guidelines are based on the GSA, you know, government standard accounting, which is very simple. Everybody does it.
So it looks like we're not ready to vote on this right now to delay it.
I'd offer a substitute motion, Mr. Chair, refer it back to the executive committee for further refinement.
Okay, we have a substitute motion to refer back to the executive committee for assignment by Supervisor Potter.
Second.
Just under
And
discussion, I don't really have a problem at all with some of the suggestions that have been made, but I do think Nancy's suggestion is worth looking at. Okay. So that would be something, if you could bring that forward, Nancy, for our digestion, that'd be great.
Okay. Great. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. It will be brought back. Thanks for the suggestions. That was a substitute motion. Okay, next is E, base reuse plan, post reassessment follow-up, reassessment report, category 1, text and figure corrections. Michael?
We're just getting the PowerPoint loaded up. Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. Thank you, Chairman Edelin, members of the board. This Category 1 topics and options item is a continuation from the previous board workshop that was on February 15th, last month. This is an outcome from the reassessment report that was completed in December of last year. This list here that I think you've seen many times, it probably doesn't need too much introduction, but this is a recap of the basic categories of topics and options that came out of the reassessment report, and obviously Category 1 is the issue for today. Category 1 consists of corrections to the 1997 base reuse plan text and figures. These are very much non-substantive corrections consisting of typos, editorial errors, outdated references, and clarifications. I hope everybody has a printout of the PowerPoint show for board members and members of the public. Anybody who might have difficulty seeing the screen, we handed those out before the meeting, and there are extras at the table. Well, there's some extras at the table in the lobby. I've included just a few representative examples of the subtypes of changes within Category 1, although we also did include the full text of the changes as an attachment to the board report. An example of a typo, there are many, but this particular one is the City of Marina. Obviously, it's the city, 2 words instead of one word. As an example of an outdated reference, this particular example here makes reference to a 1991 document that has been superseded by later versions, so it makes sense just to include language that refers to the current version of the aforementioned regulatory document there. And as an example of a clarification, the one example up on the screen there is just an example of some wording that hopefully makes it more clear what's being referred to. The original language referred to land recipients of land recipients of properties within the former Fort Ord, and it may not be that clear what a land recipient is, so the preferred language there, or the suggested edit, would be recipients of land within the former Fort Ord. So those are 3 brief examples of the types of corrections that are outlined within Category 1. These corrections come straight out of the reassessment report, pages 3-3 to 3-19. As I mentioned, that is attached to your board report today. The attachment consists of a summary table and the full text, presented in strike-through and underline format with brief explanations where warranted, and presented in context, so it shows the full sentence or paragraph for each one of those changes. I just wanted to point out that these changes were previously coordinated with jurisdictional staff members, representatives of the admin committee. We received comments and feedback and input, and those suggestions and other input from the jurisdictional staff were incorporated into the final version of Category 1. The Category 1 changes were also publicly circulated as part of the draft reassessment report going back to October of 2012, and was finalized in December, and there have been no changes since that time. So what you're seeing before you as your attachment to the board report is taken straight out of the final reassessment report. Staff's recommendation with regard to Category 1 is that the board approve these previously identified and non-substantive corrections. Staff mentioned the previous workshop and maybe the board meeting before that these corrections would essentially be kept on file and included in a future publication of the base reuse plan. That publication would occur in the near future, but the schedule, full scope, and budget for that have yet to be determined, and that would be pending outcome of the currently ongoing post-reassessment workshop process and would be subject to further board review. We anticipate that future publication of the base reuse plan would be possible sometime this year, hopefully in the earlier part of this year, but until that publication takes place, then these changes would essentially be kept on file because there isn't really anywhere for them to go until the base reuse plan is published again. With regard to next steps, with the next upcoming workshop, which is scheduled for Friday, March 22nd, a week from today, 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, that's where we're going to be continuing the discussion of Category 2 and into Category 3 and 4 from the reassessment report. This is where we're going to be getting into more substantive topics and options for the board's consideration. We've included a proposed agenda for March 22nd as the final attachment to your board report. However, that's just the agenda. The detailed report and attachments for March 22nd underlying or associated with the workshop will be circulating next week on Monday, to be exact. This is the final slide. It shows a proposed revised 3-workshop schedule outline. We've had that first workshop of February 15th. Of course, that has already occurred. Because the Category 2 discussion item was opened up, but because of time limitations, we weren't able to complete that discussion. We are continuing Category 2 with the recommendation being that each of the sub-tasks within Category 2 would come back before the board as a subsequent agenda item for further board review. And that would take place in May, June, July, and August of this year. With regard to Category 3, staff is recommending that the FORA board direct the admin committee and FORA staff to work together to develop a work program, a work plan outline, if you will, for making progress on achieving completion of the currently yet to be completed base reuse plan policies and programs that were identified in the scoping report. And there will be more detail of this in the board report coming out next week on Monday, but the target is that we would be working, admin staff and FORA staff would be working together on putting together an action plan to take that on, and we would return that action plan to the board for review and input with a target date of July and August of this year. Finally, with Category 4, with regard to this workshop coming up next week, we are now recommending that the board chair appoint an advisory committee to tackle Category 4, which is where the real substance of suggested or proposed potential new or modified base reuse plan policies and programs could be explored in more depth and analyzed by a smaller committee to form recommendations for prioritizing how to take on that large amount of material in Category 4. And we are proposing that the board chair appoint an advisory committee. The advisory committee would hold approximately 3 meetings between workshops number 2 and workshop number 3, and return to the full board at workshop number 3 with priority recommendations for how to take on Category 4 in the near and medium term outlook. Related to this, we are recommending that the board consider postponing workshop number 3, which was previously tentatively planned to take place on April 19th. However, in order to allow time for the committee to do its work and to return to the board with recommendations and priorities, we think it would be appropriate to postpone workshop number 3 to a later date in order to allow more time for that to occur. And we've identified Friday, May 17th as a potentially very workable date that we would like to propose as a suitable date for the workshop, and so we're asking for feedback on that as well. But returning to the primary issue at hand for today, which is Category 1, you do have the full text of those changes before you, and staff would welcome any questions or feedback on that.
Okay, any questions by board members? Question? Yes, Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have 2 questions. One is on page 44 of our packet, there are some changes indicated to the hydrology policies and programs. And looking specifically at the wording of Policy B1, I noticed that the wording is different for the City of Marina as opposed to Seaside and the county. For the City of Marina, it says the city shall ensure additional water supply, but for Seaside and the county, it says shall ensure additional water to critically deficient areas. I guess I wonder what the reason is for the different wording, because often the policies are the same across jurisdictions. That's just sort of stood out. And while I'm on this, I'll just say that in order to find that, I had to cross-reference between what's in the packet and the base reuse plan. And part of what I asked for last time was a step-by-step, chapter-by-chapter ability to go through and see what these changes are and what that means to the entire document. It's very cumbersome to try to do this, ourselves and hope that we find everything. So that's my first question. And then my second question is that I think there's some typos in the corrections. So on page 46, there are, so it's at the bottom of the first column, we're talking about changes to program B1.2, and there are some programs that are to be added to the county section to make up for the fact that the county's name is being removed from the marina section, and that makes sense. But the programs that you've listed on page 46 as program B-2.4 through B-2.7 should actually be numbered B1.4 through B-1.7. And then you would still need to show that the changes to County Policy B2 back in the base reuse plan on page 353, I think, there are references to marina programs that don't exist under that policy number. So I just want to highlight that those were a couple of things that I ran across that to me illustrate the need to go through this quite deliberately and carefully. But maybe you can explain what's going on there.
The policies and programs between, so the policies and programs are assigned to Seaside, Marina, and Monterey County, and in some cases the numbering is different for the same topic or the same action that applies to 3 different jurisdictions. You would think it would have the same policy or program number, but because there are different policies and programs that are interspersed between the different jurisdictions, in some cases a B1 for the city of Marina might be an A1 for the county of Monterey, or vice versa. So it's possible that there is an error somewhere in the references that you have identified, but it also may be just an artifact that they are in fact numbered in the original base reuse plan differently, because there are slightly different variations between the cities and the county.
Thank you. And although I don't agree with that in this particular case, it's because the wording is exactly the same as is in Marina's B-1.4, whatever the numbers are. The wording is exactly the same. It's just the numbers that are wrong. So that's why that kind of caught my eye. And then I guess in terms of the policy, my first question, any clue as to why the wording would be different between the city of Marina as opposed to the city of Seaside and the county of Monterey?
I would have to look into that a bit, but this is basically just taking language that was already in the base reuse plan and attempting to make it align more cleanly or follow the format that is presented for the majority of the policies and programs. So this shouldn't be creating any new language. My understanding is that this is only reducing the need for cross-references and basically having all of the policies and programs specific to Marina be under Marina, for example, or under Seaside or under the county without needing to have a lot of needing to jump around in the document. But there shouldn't be any changes from what would the wording that was actually originally in the base reuse plan.
Thank you, through the chair. And you haven't achieved that in these 2 cases, so just want to alert you to that.
Okay. Any other questions by members of the board? Seeing none, out to the public. Any members of the public wish to make any comment?
Yes, I'm representing the members of the public because I don't think that this venue is conducive to community input. It's a board meeting, and it's being conducted as such. So it's really hard to come in with comments on decisions that have already been made. To me, a reassessment is looking at a process that has been flawed and not conducive to the needs of the people. And if that is not what is happening here, the language should be changed. Those improvements and the information that was gathered from people from these little workshops should be included. So there should be some very significant changes to this reassessment concerning the forward-based reuse plan. Now, I didn't understand, and I didn't get one of those PowerPoints. I didn't understand this little presentation here. But we're looking at improving how our community is looking at improving the quality of life for the people who live here, and for all these years have not had a chance to improve the quality of their life through job creation, business development, or anything of that nature. Now, we've had a lot of developments going up, and those developments have not been what the community have wanted, because there's a few jobs that come out of them, and most of those jobs go to people that are not local. Our community is steadily being impacted by being displaced by more affluent people, and we can't keep going along with this. We need to see these changes. They need to be implemented, and we need to come up with a community-based economic development process rather than these big developments that are outside of the people who live here, who have no voice in what we should do or shouldn't do. No voice. Decisions are being made, and we're being told this is what we have. These changes need to be made. If we're not going to be recognized, I don't even see why we keep coming to speak and then we are being ignored. Where is the language? Where is the information from the workshops? And I hear we're going to have additional workshops. What is the purpose of those workshops? And the purpose of paying people to listen to the community, whatever community people they're listening to, and then we don't see the information being put forward. Yeah, I understand.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I have to sit down now. Thank you.
We do appreciate your comments. Next member of the public, please.
Good afternoon. I commend Jane on her thorough search and finding things that aren't correct and the typos and whatnot. I'd encourage the rest of... Oh, what's wrong? Hello? Is that better? Okay. I commend Jane on actually reading the material and finding current errors in what was supposed to be a corrected document. I found some others, like on page 53, when your staff member said, we're not trying to change language, and here is remove 68 bypass, relocate multimodal corridor, all kinds of stuff. From attending some of these meetings, I get the notion that a large part of you don't read the material in front of you or presented to you for you to vote on. Hence, unfortunately, our public have to take time off. The current discussion, or the previous discussion about traveling 100 miles to someplace. A lot of people drive 100 miles a day. Maybe not around here, but other places. So I thought that was a pretty petty argument they're brought on, and it reflects what the FORA board's looking, the way they do business. You guys show up, you don't read the material, there's no comment on any of this by any of you except for one person, or two at the most, and the public are watching, and one of the next agenda items is real important as to what you guys have been up to. And I would say you guys should tread lightly and be a little bit more cognitive of your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next member of the public, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Campbell, a resident of Seaside, and my understanding of this process is it's to deal with corrections and omissions. And you're not really discussing maps, but whether it's a map or an actual description of what's going on, there's some features in Fort Ord that I think would be missed if, say, for example, Laguna Seca wasn't on a map or wasn't described, or Parker Flats Road. You'd consider that an omission. And I would assume you would your actions here would put those in if that was missing. I have a map here showing major features that were not included in the base reuse plan, and this map is dated 1980. It's a revision, and what it is the endemic plant preserves. They exist. They're real. They need to be in a map of any value. Unlike other features on these maps, these are special because they've been created to exist in perpetuity. I don't think you guys have taken any action ending perpetuity, so I really think correcting this document, putting these in like they should be in, will be a good test of what you are doing and the integrity of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public wish to address the board?
Good afternoon. I found it very difficult to follow in the map section. In fact, I couldn't find maps to show what changes were being made, and so this was of limited use in checking out map issues. One of the things that a revision should do is to effect some sort of reconciliation between old maps that may or may not be out of date and other decisions, or maps that have that don't reflect FORA policy. And I think that the staff needs to flag things that can be material discrepancies for your further review. For example, on page 51 of the packet, legend does not include regional context land uses, i.e. land uses outside the former Fort Ord. How does that, where's a map that shows us what we're talking about there and the kind of land use decisions that have been going on since 1993, 1997? Relocating the multimodal corridor per prior FORA board approval, how does that square with map 3.6-1, which is still retained as a map, presumably? I don't know. I don't have visually, there is no list of the maps. Revise HMP boundaries and designations per 2002 changes. You all need to be able to see this, and the public needs to be able to see this. I don't think that you can just approve without then laboriously going back at some point when there's a discrepancy that causes legal problems and have to work through it. I think that there should be discrimination at this point, because if the staff simply chooses what they think is the latest or they think best fits with the base plan, they're making the decision for you. They have to put something on a map, and you're letting them make that decision without your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak before the board?
Good afternoon. Mr. Chair, Molly Erickson, attorney with the law offices of Michael Stamp, speaking on behalf of Keep Fort Ord Wild. Do you have the letter that we submitted this afternoon? It's dated March 15th on this topic. Have you all received that? I'm seeing a nod. Yes, thank you. We've raised our primary concerns in the letter. I'd like to quote from the staff report, page 1. The staff report says, Quote, in staff's opinion, this is page 36 of your packet. Quote, in staff's opinion, these edits are of a housekeeping, non-substantive nature. End quote. That would be laughable if it were not so deadly serious and so wrong. Those were the same recommendations and the same statements made by staff to you in March 2010. Many of you sitting here today in March 2010, when you adopted changes to the master resolution to all chapters, including Chapter 8, which has created such a mess and which you are now going to address, hopefully, later today under item 8B. These are not just housekeeping. These are not just minor errata. Sure, a few of them are. Many of them are not. There are substantive changes to the map, to the text. You simply cannot put in a reuse map under the guise of a housekeeping change, a new roadway alignment, a new right-of-way, a new road like the East Side Parkway, which is what's proposed, it appears, on page 38 of your packet. Consideration number 2 suggests that you could add the map from the TAMZ 2005 fee reallocation program. What that means is the East Side Parkway, because that's when the East Side Parkway was accelerated. FORA is already in litigation over the East Side Parkway. I suggest you not dig yourself in deeper. CEQA is required for all of the substantive changes. CEQA has not been done for any of them. All of the new figures that are proposed should be shown. Not everybody is as diligent as Supervisor Parker, because even a cursory review of these proposed changes would show you the gravity and the errors you all would make by adopting them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public?
Name is Eric Peterson, and just kind of a minor point of order. The green light, which I assume means the timing is being started, is usually being started before speakers get up here. And it might be a good idea to start the timing when the speakers start. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, the public comment period is closed. Go back to the board. Sir, do you want to say something? Please.
Mike Salerno, I'm a resident of Marina. Couple things. My colleague Jason Campbell, he was discussing the issue with the maps and the plant reserves. Those are on the base. If you go out there, you can see the signs. They were created by the Army. Those would be an important thing to add to any final land use map. And secondly, I have a concern. This is from the PowerPoint. There's a reference to the board chair appointing an advisory committee to make the Category 4 changes. And now the Category 4 changes are major changes, policy and program modifications. My concern is, again, it would be a small committee. We'd like to see that in front of the full board instead of just a small appointed committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment? Going once. Okay, comment period's closed. Back to the board. Yes, Gail, you go first.
Yes. I raised many concerns in reading this, and I did read this thoroughly and tried very hard to see what the changes were. The direction that's being asked is for us to adopt these changes as being ministerial or clerical changes. And while I can agree that many of them, as explained by staff, are making sure that the city has a space in between it, I clearly think if we as directors are looking at starting at page 51, when we're making changes to maps or to figures in the base reuse plan, we are actually making changes in the plan. When I read this, I have written all over here things like who's going to make these decisions. If we're adopting these changes, for example, I'll direct your attention to a few that I wrote. Who decides this? So on page 52, land use elements, 4.1-1, it says existing development pattern at Fort Ord. No legend items, unclear what elements the map represents. So a clerical correction would be that someone is going to decide what those mean. Another one, update trailhead locations to reflect existing conditions and current plans. Who's deciding this? I don't see a map where I'm being asked as the director to approve a change, but clearly that's a change. Removal of Highway 68 bypass. One of the things, relocate multimodal corridor per prior FORA board approval. What approval? Where is that document? What was the date of the approval? What was approved? Was there a CEQA satisfied at that point? Because all of these changes, removing things from maps, trigger CEQA events. I just see these as not ministerial, and that they really need some further clarification. So if you're being asked to approve these, I think we have a great difficulty. If you're asking for direction to direct staff to come back with maps that show us where this stuff is, what these changes would look like, are we as the board members supposed to be exercising our discretion, or are we delegating our discretion to EMC, to staff? It's very, very unclear. Also, I do want to indicate that we are hearing a lot of statements from the public about it's very unclear to the public. And I know there was a hearing this morning on a preliminary injunction asking us not to go further and we got a letter that I just read sitting here, that I think we need to stop and give that some consideration as well. That preliminary injunctions are not easily obtained in a court system. And the fact that the court did not dismiss it, but asked for further briefing, asking that it come back on April 12th, perhaps we need to slow down, show respect to the court, and put this over until that is heard on April 12th. And to prevent an adverse press reaction to us as the FORA board member, and would one more month really be that adverse to us. So I have a problem with it as presented, and I have a problem with proceeding.
Gail, thank you. Jason?
I think a number of us have a heightened sensitivity to the question of replacing certain words with other words, given what we will be taking up later on this evening. And as I read through it, there are certain words that I can understand why staff may judge them to be clarifications, but I can also understand a reasonable interpretation that they would be judged otherwise. And as Gail points out, ultimately it has to be our judgment. Let me just give an example. I think that most of the judgments, as has already been spoken to, come up in the map section, but on page 43 of the packet, on the right-hand column under volume 2, page 327, this is just an example, is talking about incentives to promote the development of an integrated attractive park and open space during the development of individual districts or during the planning of individual districts. To me, those two words mean different things. I don't know what the ramifications are of changing one word with another, but if we're told that these are not supposed to be substantive changes, I raise the question, and I will ask, and my question is, why are we making the change? What does development, what's wrong with saying development, and what's right about saying planning? Why is planning a clarification and not a new concept? So I have that. I'd like to hear an answer to that specific question, and then I'd like to suggest a path forward.
Okay. Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, my comments are going to be a little bit more broad. You know, as it was pointed out, this is staff's opinion. We all have opinions. We can sit here and opine on, and there's some people that get paid to opine. The issue for me today is that we're bringing up things that we read and asking staff to answer on the spot. If we're going to work together to get through any of this, then we should read the material. We should put it up against the base reuse plan, because this is what it is, basically is an errata of the base reuse plan. Look at the maps. Try to answer your own questions. And if you can't, call staff. Let them know, I have a question about this, and I will probably bring it up at the board meeting. So when you ask the question here, staff will be prepared to answer your question in a very concise manner so that everybody can know what the answer is. What we're doing now is we're trapping staff in a situation where they can't possibly answer your questions in a very quick manner. Now we're going to have to go back and answer those questions, and then we're going to do the same thing again next week or next month. We're going to wait until the meeting to lay out more questions, and we're going to go back and do it again. When does it end? The thing is that we should be working together with staff. And that goes for the public too. If they have questions, call the staff and get some clarity. And if nothing else, at least staff can work on that question for the meeting so that we can move forward instead of backwards. Thank you.
Other comments? Let's go to the left over here first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask for a refresher. I think some of the points that have been brought up about the potential significance are important to consider, particularly for maps. Seeing it before and after is extremely helpful. My recollection, however, and we're accusing staff of originating all these things. My recollection is during the reassessment process, we received extraordinarily extensive public input, including long letters of point after point of small and large inputs from a couple of our cities, and I'm sure Marina was one of those. And I'm suspecting, and perhaps staff can give us a sense of it, but I'm suspecting a lot of the things presented as errata, in fact, came directly from both citizen input and from city input on the base reuse plan. So I'm wondering if we could get an update and a sense of the source of these changes that are being proposed.
Michael will make a comment.
Yeah.
I think Steve and Darren can make a little more detailed comment, but several of the things that came up today were specific comments we received from regional agencies like TAMC or MST or others. Darren, I think there are innumerable ones that came from the public, the Sierra Club and others about typos and other incorrect items. Do you want to make give us more detail?
At this level of input and observations, not so much at a policy level, but in terms of these fairly detailed observations, it was very much a mix of input from FORA staff, the consultants at EMC, and some observations from jurisdictional staff, maybe through the admin committee. I think that's fair to say that that's more the source of this type of correction, more so than public input. But it was a blend of all of the above.
Okay, Ian, you have a question.
I just don't know where it would end. You know, now we want to go line by line, and what is the staff there for? I mean, if the directors want to sit in this room and go line by line and agree on a definition of development or planning, and I look for page 43, volume 2, I think it's page 327, but it goes to Seaside, and it says that the City of Seaside will use incentives to promote the development of an integrated, attractive park open space system during the scratch-out development during the planning of individual districts and neighborhoods. That sounds like a positive thing. You know, we're going to integrate it into the planning, not the development after the plan, but into the plan before you develop. So, you know, we can wordsmith this to death, but my responsibility is to make sure we have a good plan. Now, if the public has some words they want to change around, bring them up front, bring the question up front. If directors want to sit up here and wordsmith it to death, then let's start line by line. But don't come to the meeting and pick out point by point. Let's start at the top of the line and agree on that. But everybody know that doesn't make sense. So we need to do something. And so when I listened to it, when I first heard the recommendation about a subcommittee, I was like, no. You know, I want to be in the room. I want to have some say on that. But now it sounds like the perfect thing. A subcommittee needs to be empowered and paneled to go over this because it's going to come back to the board anyway. But I don't see how we sit up in here, 26 of us, and go line by line when we just paid a consultant and staff to do that. And they came up with this. So I would like to see the questions put out. If you have a concern about a particular definition of a word, but then we had to find the person that put it in there and what was their determination of why they put that word in there. So it's all about what we want to do. And either we want to grow or we don't want to grow. And you should just come out in front and say it. Not penny pinch over the word develop or plan. If you don't want to go forward, just say you don't want to go forward. Or you know, that's my opinion.
Okay.
So
the staff has estimated that it would take about 3 hours. We can call a meeting. I have no problems in doing it. We can sit down and go through every one of those errata point by point and spend 3 hours here and go through it and achieve consensus. We could do that. Another option, I think there was members of the public and members of our board that would like to see the maps and like to see some of the original documents, which I think that makes sense. Using Councilman Ogilvy's idea, perhaps if we were to provide further supporting documents to the board for their study, and if all the board members were to study the documents in detail like Supervisor Parker's done, and notify the staff directly of any problems they have or any issues or whatsoever beforehand, so we don't have to sit here for 3 hours going through it line by line. The staff could then summarize the comments received by the board, bring it back next time, and we could vote on it very quickly with hopefully achieve 100% consensus. If comments?
No, I just wanted to actually respond to what was said by several directors. It's not that we're not trying to move forward. The point that I was trying to make is there's a distinction between what is clerical errors. Category 1 has been described to us as clerical errors. And I'll give you one that just screeches at me. On page 53, it says the City of Seaside Land Use Concept, Volume 2, page 231, 4.1-4. It says the Veterans Cemetery site is missing. It's my understanding, in my review of the base reuse plan, the Veterans Cemetery was not included. Addition of the Veterans Cemetery, while we all are in agreement that needs to happen, that is not a clerical error. That is a change in the land use. My objection to these is that they go beyond clerical errors, and we need to sift out and look at these on a map and make individual decisions as FORA board directors. Are we approving the changes that are actually being proposed here? For example, it says there's a legend that says there's an equestrian center, but the equestrian center does not appear on the map. That's repeated in here multiple times. Who's making the decision in the map where the equestrian center is going to be placed? You're changing the land use. That is not a clerical error as defined by staff. So that's the distinction that I'm trying to raise.
Okay. Thank you, Gail. Ralph.
Yeah, you just brought up a point about the Veteran Cemetery and the site missing. That was a board action taken in 1997, 8. That was an action taken by this board. So that, is appropriate. The thing is that we need to do some of our work. Our work is, some of us have the luxury of having aides and and so on, but we have to do our work. We have to go into the documents. All that stuff is on the website. It's all there. We have to do our due diligence. And we can ask staff, if we run into a wall, that's what our staff is here for. They work for us. Talk to them. Say, I can't find this document. They'll direct you to it. They will let you know where it is, how to get it. I had questions about some maps in the surplus 2 area. Oh, yeah, just go to this site, go here, go there, you're there. And then lo and behold, there's all this information. But we have to use our staff wisely. We can't just dump a bunch of stuff on them because we don't want to take the time to do it.
Okay, yes, Tom.
Yeah, if I understood Chair Edlin a moment ago, you seem to be on a path to perhaps postpone this to another meeting. I will support that, but I will reveal that I have completely selfish reasons for doing so. We've heard the public say that if we were to approve this tonight, this will further embroil us in even more litigation, and I have to point out that every dollar that FORA spends on litigation is $1 less that you can give to Marina Coast Water District for future water projects.
Very good.
I did have a question perhaps for council on page 53 where it indicates in the right-hand column under the proposed 2015 transportation network, it says to correct the map to remove Highway 68 bypass per current Caltrans plans. Now, I don't have any particular personal problem with that, but I was just wondering when Caltrans got the authority to modify FORA's base reuse plan.
If I could take a shot at that, what that reference to is on page 53 that's a reference to removing the Highway 68 bypass from the 2015 anticipated build-out. Although there's nothing going on right now that indicates that Caltrans intends to ever build that 68 bypass in the foreseeable future. It is still a conceptual, hypothetical project that they have on their books. However, there's no reason to think that it's essentially impossible that it would ever be developed within a 2015 time horizon. So that was the intention of that comment, I believe, that you're flagging on page 53. Going back to a couple of the previous comments, relative to adding the Veterans Cemetery to the Seaside Planning Area map, that's basically a consistency issue between the land use concept map that we rely so heavily upon in the base reuse plan. The Veterans Cemetery is shown on that map, and so the intention of that comment had to do with achieving consistency between the Seaside Planning Area map, which is essentially a zoom in, if you will, on the land use concept map. And if the Veterans Cemetery is shown on the overall land use concept map, then it just seems natural that it should be shown with the same level of detail on the Seaside Planning Area detail map as well, which is it's not a detailed site plan. It's not any project level approval or anything of that nature. It's just indicating that a veteran cemetery has been planned on that site going back for many years, and that's the only intention, or that would be the only effect related to that change, to show to clarify on that simple Seaside Planning Area map where the Veterans Cemetery is planned. The location of the Veterans Cemetery was not at issue in Category 4 of the Reassessment Report, at least in terms of its existing designation on the Land Use Concept Map. Category 4 of the Reassessment Report discusses the possibility, it's not recommending that the FORA board should do this, but it discusses the possibility, because it was raised through public comment, that if the FORA board should choose to do so, there was a significant number of people at the scoping report phase who expressed an interest in exploring other possibilities for the Veterans Cemetery. Again, not a recommendation that the FORA board pursue that, but just recognizing that that was a topic that was raised during the scoping report from public input. The issue in Category 4 of the Reassessment Report also dealt with the issue of what the designation, the land use designation in the base reuse plan is or should be as it relates to other actions that have undergone consistency determination coming from the City of Seaside general plan, but that's a land use designation question, not a question as to the existing location of the veteran cemetery as shown in the land use concept map in the base reuse plan.
Okay, thank you. Jason, you go first this time.
I was hoping to make a motion to try to move this forward.
Yep, okay.
So I move that we direct staff to bring back before and after maps that reflect the proposed changes in this this document and for further board consideration.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Yes. Jill?
Yeah, I wanted to add an amendment that where referenced, would you accept this as a friendly amendment, that where referenced that it's per a prior approval, that we are informed as to what date the approval happened, which governing board, and the specific nature of the CEQA compliance, so we know what we're looking at.
Okay. The comment on the motion, Ian, please.
I don't know if that'll pass today. That's quite a bit. But my comment right now is just what happened right now, and I want to bring a point to it before we forget. We actually had a staff member sit up here and say he is making sure that we know that staff is not recommending that the veteran cemetery be moved.
Right.
That's how unclear staff is because of what's going on here. Do you see what I'm saying? He should have known for the last year that we're clear that the cemetery is there, that it should be on a map. He made it clear that's all they're doing is putting it on the map, but he said, I want to make sure we wasn't recommending moving it because we're unclear. We're not sure. And everybody wants to, when you're in front of the veterans, you raise your hand, you say, I support the veterans, veteran cemetery, but why is staff not clear? Because we keep chopping this thing up. And so I just point that out, that's the ambiguity that's going on right now with what is surrounding not moving forward. So if we want to play around, we can play around, but I just wanted to show you, even he was uncomfortable making sure that we knew he wasn't recommending that it was not going to be there. That's already been done. No one is going to sit up here and try to move that cemetery. I don't think. But I want you guys to know I'm not making the statements up. That's true. That's true life. So
okay.
I think that motion is pretty complicated. I don't know if it'll pass tonight. If we could just dial it back a little bit.
Well, hold on.
Hang on. The motion, I didn't accept the amendment. So the motion is simply that we see side-by-side maps before and after reflecting the changes proposed here.
Okay, we have a motion, non-acceptance of the amendment. Do we have a second?
Second.
And
Okay, the
could I ask
second,
for
Mayor Kemp.
Could I ask for
discussion on the motion? Yes.
Clarification on the motion. So would that mean that we would essentially not vote on any of these changes? It would give us a chance, if the FORA staff isn't going to go through and analyze everything, page by page and make sure, we're going to have to take the time to do it. And so if that's the understanding, is that we'll just postpone taking action on any of this until we can actually see the maps and do more analysis?
That's correct. Mayor Rubio, I think, correctly pointed out that the sorts of questions that I had, I should have asked that previously. I take that as a responsibility. This will give me a chance to work with staff to get clarification as to whether planning means something different than development, and if so, what that entails. You have a series of questions. I think for the purposes of the full board and the public process, what's most important is to see before and after maps so we know exactly what we're being asked to vote on. And hence, my motion is limited to that element.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Well,
Camp.
I do have a comment. I think kind of adding on to the idea that we do have an obligation to do our homework. What I would suggest is we invite all members of the board and any members of the public who want to submit specific comments to staff to do that. And it's kind of a speak now or forever hold your peace. I think we've got a lot of keen eyes on this document, and they recognize issues that do need to be confirmed. Let's get them into staff and give them a fair chance to be prepared to handle it at the next reading. Otherwise, we're going to be picking things apart forever. And I'd just like to read a quote by Alexander Hamilton, if I might, because no, it's kind of relevant. if mankind were to resolve to agree in no institution of government until every part of it had been adjusted to the most exact standard of perfection, society would soon become a general scene of anarchy and the world a desert. And I think we're working ourselves up to a desert if we continue in the style that we're going
Bill,
today.
very well
On the
stated.
question, are we talking about submitting questions and concerns about the category 1?
Yes.
I want to be clear, because we don't need 3 or 4 different bites at the apple. We already did the reuse assessment.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we have two nays. Just to reiterate what Mayor Rubio was saying, we do have a responsibility not only in Category 1, but Category 2, 3, and 4, and all the issues that come before this board. If we've got questions, it is considered appropriate to ask. If you don't know what the if you get the questions after you get the packet, please ask staff. Staff will answer the questions in the way possible. Obviously, we'll be here and hear a comment, and something will pop into our minds. That's fair game, but. Asking 7, 8, 9, 10 questions of staff when it could be done ahead of time, it wastes everybody's time. So just for whatever it's worth. Okay, next on the yes, Authority Council.
Under your under the master resolution, issues that do not receive unanimity come back to the board at its next ensuing meeting, and that would be Friday next.
You mean our workshop?
The workshop is a board
How do we
meeting,
go about doing that?
and if
How do we not? How we do it? Does everybody? I don't think everybody has enough time between now and the next Friday to go through and do a good job on this.
No, it's just a second vote on the motion.
second
Oh,
vote on
second
the
vote on
motion.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all I'm talking about.
Okay.
That was the action that failed to receive unanimous approval.
Okay. No, that's all right. I didn't know what you were talking about. Okay, now we go to the information items under old business, looking at 7, the CIP reviews of Phase 2 study information. I'll be turning this over to Mayor Pro Tem Frank O'Connell.
First of all, it's my understanding that since it's almost 5:30, we have to have a motion to continue this beyond 5:30 unless no one makes a motion, we all go home. Is there anyone make a motion to go beyond 5:30?
I would make a motion to go beyond 5:30 if we pass the information item and go to the next action item.
So you're requesting that we
we're
delay
go-
going
yeah.
to 7A and B, 7B and we go directly to 8A and B?
Right, if we're going to stay longer, let's do some action.
Is that's your motion? Is there a second to that motion? That would go directly to 8A and B at this point.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any comments by board members? Out to the public? Do we need to? Coming back, yes. Needs to be to a time certain.
20 minutes. We did 20 minutes? No, that's 40 minutes. 6. I move that we extend the meeting to 6 o'clock.
Second.
That's a substitute motion? Is that what we're
Yes.
looking at?
Yes.
Any comments on the substitute motion? Out to the public? Bringing it back?
Clarification on the motion, is that including moving to items A and B?
Yes. Oh, it's your motion.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get it done.
So could you clarify the motion now that we've had several of them? Please, this is a substitute motion, if I understand correctly.
Chair, I move that we extend the meeting to 6 o'clock and change the agenda to the action items.
8A and 8B?
8A and 8B.
And I still second that.
And let me just point out, you have to cover, if you don't cover anything else, you must cover item 9, which is the communications, oral communications.
Yeah, that's all.
Well, at 6 o'clock, I guess we can make another motion if we have to. Any other comments? Public? Come back. All in favor? Aye, please. Aye. Opposed? That's a great way to break myself into this. That was a tough motion to begin with. All right, we're going to, by way of request from Mayor of Carmel and the consensus of the board, we're going to 8B first, which is the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Master Resolution Amendments, which is on page 91 through page 110. This is an action and information item. Michael, who would be our legal counsel, will be addressing this matter. Thank you.
I would hope that this item would go very rapidly, despite the vast amount of glandular fluid that's been secreted over it. I don't think I've ever seen an issue that could be as easily dismissed as this one. The recommendation is simply to go back to the language in Chapter 8 that preceded the 2010, with a couple of exceptions that are talked about in the staff report. I could go on at length in defense of myself. I feel as if I've been accused of participating in the Kennedy assassination conspiracy somehow, but I won't. I'm not going to say anything, no matter how provoked.
I assume that's statement. Is there any questions at all from board members? Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to be clear. There's some language in gray on pages 105 and 106 of our board packet. I didn't, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any explanation of what that was in our board report. I think I did see a letter from the Sierra Club indicating that this was some language. I'm not quite clear whether this is language that was being added that they haven't necessarily agreed on, or if it's language that was due to be removed. So if you could just clarify for me what's happening with the gray language on pages 105 and 106, assuming that, I think there's pretty clear consensus that the word changes, the shalls and mays and all of that, we want to go back to the original, but I'm not clear what will happen with the gray if we say, let's go back to the original.
I think Authority Council suggested that we return Chapter 8 to how it was prior to the actions taken in 2010. The area in gray was part of an extensive process that occurred about 6 years before that, as a result of a series of meetings that we held both at the board level, at the committee level, and through a special housing task force at the request of Congressman Farr and I believe Assemblymember McPherson originally, to look at affordable housing, and then of course also Assemblymember Laird also supported and were actively participated. These provide for some rather specific items that the jurisdictions would include in making their consistency determinations, and therefore the Sierra Club, who participated in these meetings, questions whether they were actually provided with formal notice, and we have not found evidence in the record that that's the case, and we want to continue to work actively with the Sierra Club on this language, because their letter indicates they may not oppose the language, they're just opposing the process. And so by doing the action in 2010, it still leaves open how to address this. There are multiple ways it could be addressed. It could become a new section of the board that's not part of Chapter 8 that would relieve the pressure on the notice and all the other questions. Or maybe it can stay as part of Chapter 8, depending on discussions we intend to actively have with the Sierra Club.
Thank you. So basically what you're saying is if we desire to be compliant with the conditions of the settlement agreement, the gray language would go away for the moment, and if for some reason FORA wanted to keep those negotiations going to include this language or language similar to it, we could do that after we get back to square one.
Well,
Great.
the point is that the sole exercise here today is to undo changes that happened in 2010. That's all we're doing. And the language that you've asked about is something that was adopted years and years before 2010. So it's not part of the action tonight. Is that still not clear? You're looking as if you're unclear what I'm saying.
Well, I had understood from Mr. Hulamard something different, so...
Well, this
maybe I'm
language,
just-
the highlighted language will stay in Chapter 8. Now, whether it's there forever or only for today, two different questions. But the exercise that I'm recommending is that we go back to pre-2010, which is the change that the Sierra Club was unhappy about. No decisions have been made that were predicated on these 2010 changes. No planes have hit mountains. No ships have gone down. Just go back to 2010 and then worry about whatever else we want to worry about.
Does that answer your question, Board Member Parker?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members?
Yeah, just quickly, Chair.
Yes, Ian.
I had the similar concern about the gray, and I understand the negotiation part about that. But does the gray area have to be in this section as we go forward? Because, no, I don't need a legal opinion. I don't need a legal opinion. Because what I'm saying is, I don't know if we need to, if it's not in this section, then we don't really need to negotiate with the Sierra Club about putting it in there. Maybe that's a legal answer. But if it's in Section 8, then we have to have a discussion with them. So that's really my question, Michael. Is that, okay. But I'm prepared to go back to 2010 on this document.
So it's my understanding that what we have today is on the agenda is to go back to the prior decision, go back to the document prior to March of 2010. And it's my further understanding that the dark portion in Chapter 8 or in Section 8 was there on, for example, February 28th of 2010. So if there is going to be a motion relating to this particular agenda item, it would seem that would be going back just to remove those, that vote that related to this chapter in March of 2010. And we could discuss later on whether or not T and the other sections should be removed later on.
Well, actually, I think the motion would be to adopt Chapter 8 as it is published in the staff report. I'd rather not elaborate on why that's so slightly different, but I guess I will. The Sierra Club has gone through Chapter 8 with a fine-tooth comb and made a number of changes that were not made in the 2010 amendments. And I'm perfectly okay with that. None of them are consequential. They're capitalizing letters here and there and so forth. But it's just technically slightly different from the result would be slightly different from rescinding the action that your board took in 2010. So the motion that I'm recommending is that you adopt Attachment B to Item 8B as Master Resolution Chapter 8. And before we go too much further, I think it might be appropriate to seek public comment.
Yes, we're going to public comment. I don't consider that to be a motion at this point, but are there any other members of the board who have comments?
Well, I just have one question. I mean, we're held to a standard where if we change a word, we have to show, if we change a letter, a word, or anything, we have to show the crossed out version and the highlighted version and everything. But Sierra Club can come to FORA and make changes, and oh, by the way, it's already included and we didn't know. That kind of chaps my hide. I'm a little astonished actually that that Sierra Club has so much power. That we can have a settlement with them, and Okay, we go through all these actions, the public knows about it, goes on for 10 years, and now we're back to square one because of, oh, we didn't see that back then, but let's change it now. And oh, by the way, the language that you had in 2010 wasn't correct enough, so let's change that, but we're not going to tell anybody about it until you vote. I've got a problem with that.
Thank you very much. Any other board members? Just for the record, there is no motion pending. The Authority Council doesn't have the right or authority to make a motion. It's not being a member of the board. So right now, there is no motion pending. We'll go out to the public for public comment. And again, when you come up, legally, you do not have to state your name. It's nice to have it so we can keep the minutes as specific as possible, but legally, we cannot require your name. But some people we know very well.
I'm Jane Haynes, representing the Sierra Club. And what Sierra Club is not asking for any changes whatsoever that were not agreed to by both FORA and Sierra Club. So the changes, the original proposal from FORA staff was to go back and just change the 2010 changes. That came to 133 changes. Then Sierra Club said, well, how about the other 33 changes? Those are changes that FORA agreed to also. They're the changes that go back to 1998. So what we want is we want only changes that FORA has agreed to and Sierra Club has agreed to. Those are the only changes we want. And what that results in is you take out all of this highlighted portion, what's being called the gray portion. So that would not be part of a motion that would be acceptable to Sierra Club. You do add this part that has to do with the fees, that's the cross out, and that we agreed on last July. So I want you to know what you're being told here is just not true. And if I understand correctly what you're being told, it's nothing that we're asking for. And by the way, what's in here is fine. It's except for the gray part. And except for that, well, not except, we want that part in about the fees changed. But Sierra Club made it clear. I have an email, I can show you the email, that we want those 33 changes in addition to the 133. 133 were made in 2010. 33 have been made at some other time. We don't know when. So we want, what's in here is the 133 plus the additional 33, and that's what we want. It does not include the gray section, but it does include those changes in the part that has to do with the fees. Is that clear? Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? If you would, please, if you're planning to speak, would you move up towards the front? We want to accomplish as much as we can before we have to make another motion.
Chris Mack. So I think for those who are still here, unfortunately, as a board member that's gone, I was part of the executive committee that committed this crime. I find there's a lot of balls you have, Mr. Rubio, for saying what you did when you were part of this deception on the Sierra Club. And
Sir, if you would, excuse me a moment. I'll give you the appropriate amount of time, but would you please make your comments if they're critical of a constructive nature, not of a personal nature? It doesn't benefit anyone here to be personally attacked. We're trying to do the best we can. Right. We're all volunteers. We make mistakes. We do the best we can. So I appreciate the fact that you may be upset, but that just creates more tension that's not necessary. Thank you.
Okay. Look, what happened in 2010 wasn't a clerical error as put in the paper by the FORA representative, media representative. It was a planned, calculated move. And it wasn't the FORA board or members of the FORA board or the staff that brought it to light. There's no intention for FORA to expose what would happen. And now some of the perpetrators, one of which was just voted back into the executive committee, are sitting here defending themselves and trying to turn it back on the Sierra Club. You guys should be really careful about what you're doing here. I don't mean to threaten you or anything, but the public entrusts you with sound, conscientious, smart decisions, not deceptive, behind back rooms. And an agreement is an agreement. You did a breach of contract. There's 3 of you. Well, actually, Jonathan isn't here. Or is he? Anyways, there's 3 or 4 of you in this room that were in those rooms when those deceptions were made. Oh, council's here too. So, does a bank robber change their... Why should we believe what staff has to say in the previous presentations when they're part of this deception? They're calling on maps that aren't approved maps, saying, for example, the Veterans Cemetery. I don't want to bring that up, but it's just the map was never officially approved, regardless of what Mr. Rubio said earlier, and regardless of what staff said. So if we're trying to define where the truth lies and where the facts are, they're pretty muddled by staff and members of the current board. And there's some members of the current board that are trying to get down to the truth. I find there's one person that maybe should find himself a seat on the other side of the table or the other side of the room as far as the board, for board staff. When I look back, I see the board divided between those who are deceptive and those who are working for the public and wanted to find out where truth lies and where the facts are. So, I'm very disappointed in our public process and our public representatives here. Not all of them, but a few individuals.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Molly Erickson, attorney with the law offices of Michael Stamp, here on behalf of Keep Fort Ord Wild. Did you receive our letter dated March 14th on this item? I did
Yes.
not see one outside. I'm sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have 3 short comments to make. One is Keep Fort Ord Wild tried to find out what actually happened in March 2010. How were these changes made? All the records are gone. They've been destroyed. As you know, the executive committee and the administrative committee is supposed to look at all the draft board packets before it comes to the board. They're gone. Those draft board packets are gone. You can't see them. So we don't know what happened. All we have are some miserable little paragraphs summarizing the meetings without any detail. So, lost in the mist of time. The Sierra Club, a second comment, the Sierra Club is in the position of enforcing a legal agreement. What we have here today and what I'm hearing from a few of you board members is that FORA made a promise to the Sierra Club. FORA broke that promise. They sneaked around and made some changes without telling the Sierra Club. And now FORA's mad because the Sierra Club's holding them to the promise that FORA's made to the Sierra Club. This really does not bode well for any kind of trust that the public has in FORA. How is the public to believe anything that FORA says as a whole when in fact the history is when FORA makes a promise, FORA sneaks around, hides it, and changes it, and then doesn't admit it until FORA is caught. And then FORA blames the messenger. That does not set a good profile, a good message to the community. That is not the kind of public integrity we expect from public officials and from public agencies. I urge you to reverse the changes made in March 2010. One final change, one final comment. While still fresh in your memory, there was a comment made by FORA staff earlier today about the land use concept map. and why that contains the Veteran Cemetery and why you ought to then change the new map to match it. That land use concept
Ms. Erickson,
map,
that doesn't address the matter that's
it
presently
does.
here.
It addresses integrity and it addresses changes to documents, which is exactly the point you're talking about here today, and a fraudulent change, which is what happened in March 2010. Because the land use concept map that FORA staff, who admittedly was not here at the present, I can hope that he was not aware of it, but he should have been aware of it because I gave a PowerPoint presentation showing with pictures how that fraudulent map was created. That is what he now proposes to make the current map consistent with a fraudulent map. Such action would do nothing to enhance FORA's reputation and falls far below the standard of integrity expected by public agencies with public documents, which is very much the issue before you today. Thank you.
Ms. Erickson, if I may, you made a reference a moment ago to a letter of March 14th. Did you mean a letter of March 15th?
I mean a letter dated March 14th on this item. It says Ray, March 15, 2013, Agenda Item 8B, Chapter 8 of the Master Resolution.
Good. Okay.
Did you all receive that? If I said March
Yes.
15th, then I misspoke.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
14th.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Any comments by board members or motion?
Mr. Chair, okay. Thank you.
I would like to undo all the changes made in March 2010. I think that covers what we want to do here.
Second.
For clarification, are you referencing?
Could I
just-
clarify?
If I may?
Yeah.
Are you referencing just Chapter 8 or?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you. A second still hold? Counsel? You have something? Okay. There's a motion, it's a second. Mayor Kemp?
So, I don't know what we're voting on. I read the packet. I thought this was the most straightforward thing we were ever going to do. And now it has become far more complicated than I thought it should be, and maybe on minor points. There are 133 changes I think we agree on that we've got to undo. There's the highlighted section in yellow highlighter when you read it on the screen, and then there are the 33 mystery changes that may or may not be in there. What are we voting on?
Okay, let's get a clarification from counsel, if I may.
And then there's the veteran cemetery map for which we have no information. However, one member of the public seems to think it's a pivotal issue on this topic. So,
It's not. It's totally
thank you.
irrelevant.
Okay.
You're voting on the adoption of Attachment B to Item 8B that commences on page 93 of your staff report. That document does what the motion calls for.
Is that with or without the yellow highlighted parts? Will they
that
remain after we
yes,
vote?
Yes, they will.
Okay.
Because they were already in Chapter 8 in 2010.
And where are, if I might ask also, where are the 33 mystery changes that are they in there, out of there? What?
They're in there.
Do we know what
agree.
they are?
Well, I don't know where they are, but they are in a underline and strikeout document version of Chapter 8 that's on your desk. I can't tell you exactly which one is one of those and which is not, but I am assured. I haven't gone through them myself, but I'm assured that this attachment B contains all changes that the Sierra Club has asked to make.
And does that mean Forest staff is recommending that we embrace those?
Yes.
33 as well. Thank you.
Staff is recommending Attachment B to Item 8B, and that contains all of those changes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, clarification. My understanding of the motion was that it was restricted to the amendments adopted in March of 2010, and that's what I seconded. It is silent on the question of the highlighted language, because I have another motion to make on that. We get there.
The maker of the motion, is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion? Good. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No opposition? Quiet people. Anyone abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Mayor Cantor abstaining. I believe it passed, but do we feel comfortable with, I didn't hear any no's, so I'm assuming it passed.
Mr. Chair,
It was a quiet yes. Okay,
yes. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a further motion that because there isn't a record that the highlighted language was mutually agreed to, which is a condition of the settlement agreement, that we also rescind that language for now.
I'll second.
So it's moved and seconded that we rescind that portion that's shaded, so to speak. Do we have to go out to public comment on this?
Well, let's get some board comment on that
I know,
first.
but will we have to go out?
We didn't tell them we was going to separate it out.
Yes, and before we take any further action on the motion, we have to have another motion to go beyond 6 o'clock.
Only if we're going to
I'll
take...
move 6:15.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to go to 6:15. Anyone on the board? Comments? Public? Thank you, so we don't use up to 15 minutes. Back to the board, all in favor, go to 6:15. Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
So that was 3 noes? Okay, we're still good. Okay. Okay, going back to the motion made by Supervisor Parker and seconded by Board Member Morton. Is there public comments relating to this? Excuse me, the board members' comment.
Yeah, I think, I don't think we should even take it up tonight. There's other business that needs to go on, and this needs to be agendized properly, so that we can really discuss it. The motion is, I think, out of order.
Any other board members?
I do have a question about that highlighted language. Was that language there in the version that we're going back to in the vote we just took?
It was there in February of 2010, which was before the March 10 vote, yes.
Even though we had not finalized agreement on the language, it was still there.
It was passed when?
In 2004, I believe.
I see.
Yeah, it was.
So is there, it's not clear, this is the language we came up with and Sierra Club has some issues with it and we're discussing it? Is that where it stands?
Go ahead.
The Sierra Club has not indicated that they have any problems with the language. They have a problem with the notification that the language was going to be changed in Chapter 8. They may have some issues with the language, but that still is yet to be fully heard.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Morton.
Just quickly, the reason I'm supporting this motion is that the procedure is what everybody has stood up and objected to repeatedly. And to hold us to a standard that we follow the right due process procedure for the public and for the Sierra Club is so important. So I support this motion. It may be that this will be agendized and brought back before us, that the Sierra Club has a right to be heard on the issue is most important. So for that reason, whether the language is good, bad, indifferent, the motion is let's do it correctly.
Thank you. And as the chair, I'm going to take the liberty, unless there's a strong opposition to it, to go out to the public on this particular motion, since it does relate to Chapter 8 in a different manner. So if there's any member of the public who does desire to address this without doing a duplication of previous comments, please feel free to come up.
I'm Jane Haynes, representing the Sierra Club. It is not true that Sierra Club has said that it agrees with the policy in the highlighted part. We simply don't know. And I've said that to staff. We simply don't know. We have looked over all of our minutes from 2003 and 2004. We've identified 30 or 40 comments that Sierra Club had. Some show agreement, can be interpreted as agreement with this. Some can be interpreted as disagreement with this. We simply don't know. And if you adopt the highlighted part today, which I guess you just did, it's against the will of Sierra Club that you do that.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Bringing it back, we have a motion and a second. Any comments before we take a vote?
Can you restate the motion?
Board Member Parker, please.
Thank you. Yes, the motion is to delete the highlighted section from Chapter 8 at this time.
Through the chair, on the question, just to be clear, we're not adopting this today. It's already in there. We're trying to remove it. Just that's because the public said if we adopt it today. We're not adopting it today because it's already in there, and we just voted to leave it in there. But now Jane wants to remove it.
No, the previous motion only spoke to the rescinding the changes that we made in March of 2010, the mays and shalls and all that. The question of that motion was silent on the question of the highlighted section. So I made this motion to speak to the highlighted section and to allow us to take what I believe is the proper procedural step at this time, which is to remove that language from Chapter 8 because having it in there, we don't have assurance that we followed the process that is laid out in the settlement agreement with the Sierra Club. Essentially, we could be in violation of the law by including this language in Chapter 8 at this time. So I'm asking us to not include it. And if the Sierra Club and we decide that it's a good idea and we like it and we want to bring it back, I'm not judging whether it's good or bad. I'm speaking as Director Morton mentioned, I'm speaking to the process that we at FORA are obliged to follow as a result of the settlement agreement. I'm trying to get us in compliance with that, and we can bring it back at a future time with this exact same language as long as we follow the process that we are supposed to follow as it relates to the Sierra Club.
Any other board members? Mayor Burnett?
I'm sorry, but what exactly is the process that we're supposed to follow with the Sierra Club so that we can get it right this time?
First of all, it's not clear that we didn't follow it.
I wasn't asking that
Okay,
question.
the process is that we notify the Sierra Club. And it's unclear whether we did or whether we didn't notify the Sierra Club. It was so many years ago that we just don't have clear records, and no one has a clear recollection of. We know that the Sierra Club participated in the discussions, but we don't know whether the notice of process is what is an issue.
Thank you. In that case, I would like to make a friendly amendment, which is that we notice the Sierra Club of our intent to add the language that is currently highlighted back in, so that we are now in compliance with the process, such that it can be brought back at a future meeting.
It's in now.
But the motion is to take it out. And my point is, if we're taking it out and then we need to signal our intent to fully follow the process, notify the Sierra Club, and bring it back in the right door.
Through the chair.
Just for the moment, I would just say that I would accept that amendment.
And my second stands.
Chairman,
Yes.
I don't know if anybody in this room has read the highlighted area because I have a feeling a lot of people haven't read it. And what I find intriguing is if you read just part of it, what we're eliminating is some inclusionary housing for job people that are going to work. That's what you're eliminating by eliminating the gray area. I find that rather unique that that's something that this committee would want to do.
Through the chair, thank you, and that's
Thank
why Member Burnett said what he said. We're now giving the Sierra Club the notice that we are required to give them that we will add the language back in. Are there timeframes associated with their need to respond, or that's what we don't know? Forget it.
Any
Vice
other
Chair
comments?
O'Connell, yes.
Mr. Moore, then
My
Mayor Rubio.
understanding of the nature of the settlement between the Sierra Club and FORA is that legally it is a contract, which means that FORA cannot unilaterally make revisions or changes to that contract. They can propose changes to the contract. Those would have to be presented appropriately to the representatives of the Sierra Club, and any change to be made by FORA, my understanding is, would have to be agreed to by the Sierra Club. So the process is a little bit lengthier than what was just expressed. It's my understanding. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
Through the chair.
Excuse me, it's Mayor Rubio, then you, and then Ian.
You know, again, we've been talking about procedure and what's proper, but I feel that this isn't proper to take this up in this manner. The public wasn't notified that we were going to be taking this action. There's an agenda process that we have that is part of the Brown Act. If we're going to take on a new action that wasn't agendized, then we have to refer it to the next meeting. I think that if we do this, that we're going to run afoul of different laws that would govern the way that we hold our meetings. If we want to have a real procedure on this, then we have to agendize it, let the whole world know that we're going to take out inclusionary housing from the master resolution. Some people might have something to say about that.
Thank you.
I had a question because I think the last point made about the understanding with how we're going to work with Sierra Club didn't quite sound right to me. But I'm certainly open to being corrected. It was my impression that there had been a legal settlement with the Sierra Club that committed us to do certain things, and but it surprised me to interpret that to mean that now the Sierra Club has full oversight of every decision this board makes. I would have assumed that it had that in if there's anything that could impact that settlement that the Sierra Club felt was problematic, then that needed to be worked out between us, and I imagine there would be some sort of third-party mechanism, and maybe even a court, to if there's disagreement about that. But I can't imagine the Sierra Club would literally get to review every single decision this board makes, or is that the case?
That's not the case, but thank you. Ian?
Dr. Choi is turning into the case. It's turning into the case. Because every time we turn around, it's if you don't do this, we will sue you. Now, I agree where if this was not supposed to be in here, and this highlighted gray area is not supposed to be in here, let's take it out. But that's why I said earlier, we had to put it in Section 8. They're not controlling Section 8, but when we deal with Section 8, then we have to negotiate with them. So it's getting to the point where it's just about their, and that's what is it? They're a special interest, and they have a right to advocate for what they want to advocate for. But it is turning into we cannot make a move unless they agree to it. So let's just put it out there, and I'm glad you because that's what I heard, and I know he's trying to explain it differently, but that's what he said. That's what Mr. Moore said, and that's where we're at. And I understand the process. Let's correct the process. I don't want to be accused of going around the agreement. So if they not caught us, but if we did something that's not right, let's fix it. Let's fix it. But then if we have another agreement, then we may have to go to court because the settlement cannot get down to FORA cannot go forward. But we're letting that settlement turn into that. So I support taking it out, but I do think it needs to be agendized. So it would be difficult for me to vote for taking it out today, and it wasn't agendized. Because once we take out this inclusionary housing, what repercussions are there for people that's actually working on this issue right now for housing? What about the agreements we have with developers right now? And Lord only knows how long we can get that back. We just went through that. That 60-day time frame of low-income housing developers having issues with what we're doing. So if it was not put in there correctly, we don't have records of it being in there correctly, we can agendize this, and I will support taking it out because they do have a right to ask us to take it out, the Sierra Club. So I think we should go forward by agendizing it.
Mr. Chair, I would...
Supervisor Parker, then Mr. Moore, and then... Let's move on.
Mr. Chair, I'd be willing to withdraw my motion and ask that this be agendized for next month and a clear delineation of what the proper process is as it relates to the Sierra Club on Chapter 8.
Is that a motion? I'll second it.
I'm not sure of the procedure. I was,
Is this a replacement motion?
maybe it's a replacement motion.
You're withdrawing the motion you had previously, and you're
Yes.
making a new motion.
Yes.
Okay, and it's been seconded.
I'll second.
Now it's been seconded twice. Why am I losing control of this meeting? Mr. Moore?
As a professor, I face a challenge every day talking with my students, having an idea in my head that I want to have my students understand, and discovering that however I said it, whatever body language I used, whatever words I used, the message didn't come across clearly. My understanding of the Sierra Club settlement process is that Chapter 8 represents that settlement, and the only power that Sierra Club has is to agree or disagree with changes that FORA wishes to make in Chapter 8. Nothing else, none of the rest of FORA's decisions. They only have a say, which must be agreed to by both parties, in Chapter 8, and that's it. That's the limit of their power, other than, like any other citizen, to stand up at the podium and advocate for things. So just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. No other comments? Let's have a show of hands, if I may. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Opposed? Great, thank you. We do need another motion to go beyond 6:15. I would like to make a motion that we finish item 8A and item 9, and we go until we finish those two items, or 6:45, whichever comes first. We just did, yeah, we'd skip, yeah.
Second.
Okay, any comments? Anyone in the public? Back in the public, all in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Whoop. Do we have raised hands on that one? We're going to continue to finish item 8A and item 9, or 6:45, whichever comes first. Could show of hands in favor of that motion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're good. Okay. All against it, say no. 1, 2. Okay. Let's move on to item 8A, consistency determination, Seaside Local Coastal Program. And who is handling this? Go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As you know, jurisdictional legislative land use decisions, such as this item before you now, these include general plan amendments and zoning ordinances, must first be found consistent with the base reuse plan by the jurisdiction. That jurisdictional determination takes place first. Then it's brought before the FORA board for the board to make its own determination using criteria specified in Chapter 8 of the Master Resolution. The current item is subject to a consistency determination process in that it does consist of general plan amendments and zoning ordinance changes in the city of Seaside, and it does affect lands within the former Fort Ord. The only lands subject to this action are the Highway 1 Caltrans right-of-way, which basically just includes the roadway, the embankments, and the recreation trail. It does not include the railroad corridor, but that Highway 1 Caltrans corridor is within the former Fort Ord, where it passes through Seaside. The only component of the Seaside Local Coastal Program that is subject to a FORA consistency determination oversight is creation of the CTC, or Coastal Transportation Corridor designation. This designation recognizes that the Highway 1 Caltrans right-of-way is within the coastal zone that is subject to the California Coastal Commission oversight, and the CTC designation identifies transportation as the allowed use within that Highway 1 Caltrans corridor. So this action does have quite a limited scope, both in terms of what is actually before the FORA board, or in other words, within FORA's purview for consistency determination, and it's also limited in terms of what can occur within the lands that are before you, which is the Highway 1 Caltrans corridor under the proposed CTC designation. Staff is recommending that the FORA board concur with the Seaside City Council's findings that the proposed action is consistent with the base reuse plan for the reasons laid out in attachment C to your board report today. Staff would also like to acknowledge the comments submitted by Ms. Haynes regarding the potential applicability of some base reuse plan policies and programs. Her letter is attached to your board report as attachment D, and staff responses are also in your packet as attachment E, and staff's responses lay out staff's reasoning as to why, although some of the subject matter of those base reuse plan policies and programs, particularly regarding subjects such as noise and development of non-motorized transportation, having pedestrian and bicycle path network and things along those lines, although the subject matter within those policies and programs is related either physically or functionally to the Caltrans right-of-way corridor that's the subject of this action, because of the limited scope of what is before you and basically the fact that the CTC designation is only creating a land use designation where none previously existed on the Caltrans corridor, and because that designation is consistent with the existing uses, it's staff's determination that none of the policies and programs cited by Ms. Haynes or raised as questions by Ms. Haynes are in fact applicable to this action before you today. So again, staff is recommending that the FORA board concur with the City of Seaside's determination of consistency. Lisa Brinton from the City of Seaside is here to give a presentation, so I will turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair O'Connell, members of the FORA board. My name is Lisa Brinton. I'm with the City of Seaside. Given the hour, I will move rather quickly through my presentation. The local coastal program is basically a contract between the City of Seaside and the State of California to implement the Coastal Act. And with this certified LCP, we will assume permit responsibility for future development proposals that fall within the coastal zone. Now, this is a planning document, and it does not grant any project approval. We've been going through this process for almost 5 years. It was in 1983 that we had a land use program certified by the Coastal Commission. However, due to limited resources, we did not move forward with completing the process of certifying a coastal implementation plan. We began updating our LUP in 2008, and it was in February 2011 that the city originally adopted a local coastal program. It was forwarded to the Coastal Commission for consideration, and in March of 2012, Coastal Commission staff deemed our application as complete. City staff and coastal staff then collaborated in working on modifications to the LCP, and in December of 2012, the Coastal Commission unanimously approved a modified LCP, which was then approved and implemented in February of this year by our City Council. We brought the LCP for determination of consistency first to the Administrative Committee on March 6th, and it was received and recommended for approval by the FORA board. Now, the modifications to the LCP focused on 3 areas: boundary adjustments, land use designations, and further LCP refinement to make the document more consistent with the verbiage in the Coastal Act. One thing we found in updating our LCP is that with improving technology, GIS mapping, it was discovered that there was actually land within the former Fort Ord that fell within our coastal zone, which had not been identified in 1983. And so we modified our LCP boundaries to include this 146 acres, which falls within former Fort Ord lands, but is actually under the jurisdiction of Caltrans. As mentioned by FORA staff, this currently has no land use jurisdictions, and so we had to create a land use designation. So that is Coastal Transportation Corridor, which purpose is to accommodate the existing use of motorized and non-motorized forms of transportation. In addition, there were further refinements, as I mentioned, to bring the verbiage in the coastal plan in conformance with the Coastal Act. So we are before you asking, recommending, and requesting that the FORA board adopt the resolution determining that the Seaside LCP is consistent. Future legislative actions, if there is any development proposed by Caltrans in this area, would have to go before the FORA board for consideration. And our next step, this is the next to last step in our journey, is if the FORA board determines that our plan is consistent with the base reuse plan, we would then forward all approving documents to the Coastal Commission to consider final certification, and that would be done either in April or May, depending on the timing of the preparation of their packet. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much. Any board members have any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Anyone in the public having any questions? Comment? Fine. Comments and questions?
Okay. I'm Jane Haynes, representing the Sierra Club, and I want to say, in my individual capacity, I wrote comments asking if this was consistent with 6 non-implemented programs. And staff did an excellent job, I thought, of analyzing it, and their conclusion was no, there are no applicable programs. And I agreed with what staff did. I was asking the question, staff responded. It's the first time I have ever, in any legislative consistency decision at FORA, seen an analysis of that, which happens to be required by the Sierra Club settlement agreement. But so that was, they did an excellent job. They convinced me that all of the 6 questions I'd asked were satisfactorily answered. However, I also saw something in here that I had never seen before in a legislative consistency determination. And that appears, I sent you a letter this morning. Anyway, it explained that in the letter. On paragraph 4 on page 77 has a sentence I've never seen before. It's right down at the end of that, and it says, as with previous consistency determinations, this finding is subsumed into and modifies the base reuse plan land use concept ultimate development figure 3.3-1. It's never been in any FORA findings that I've ever seen before. So I looked through the record. Is there any evidence supporting that? And there's none. There's 500 or 800 or so pages on the Seaside website, plus what's in your packet. I can find no evidence supporting that there have been previous consistency determinations that were subsumed into and modified this land use map. So I sent a letter this morning to the FORA board asking that you simply strike that. And if you want to achieve exactly the same thing this would achieve, only without making the statement this does, you would insert instead, the board intends that this finding of consistency with the base reuse plan allow the base reuse plan land use concept map to be amended accordingly. So that's Sierra Club's request, that you strike this finding that is not supported by the record, and that you replace it here. Otherwise, we agree with Seaside ought to get this consistency determination. We see no reason why it shouldn't. It's just that one sentence in the finding that we have a problem with.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, remaining members of the FORA Board, Molly Erickson, attorney with the law offices of Michael Stamp on behalf of Keep Fort Ord Wild. Very briefly, we agree with the Sierra Club's concern. This is not a comment as to the specifics of the Seaside application before you today, but altogether now, page 77 of your board packet, finding 4, the last sentence states, as with previous legislative consistency determinations, this finding is subsumed into and modifies the land use concept map. You cannot do this without prior CEQA review. What this sentence is trying to do is to modify every single prior legislative consistency determination by this board. You have no idea which ones those are. I suggest you not try and modify them now without a complete analysis and without CEQA first, because changing those prior legislative consistency determinations are each and every one of those is a project. So I suggest you just strike that entirely and start fresh. Do not try and wordsmith it now, because there's another problem. The other problem is if you're going to identify any map, make sure you clarify that it's the FORA board adopted map, not the fraudulent map that staff keeps relying on. Otherwise, you'll just compound problem on top of problems. Thank you very much. I urge you to strike the last sentence in paragraph 4 on page 77. Thanks.
Thank you. Please, again, if you're a member of the public and you decide to speak, please move up towards the front so that we don't have the long walk.
Margaret
Good
Davis, I
evening,
apologize, Mr. Chairman.
No problem.
My intention is not to frustrate the FORA board, but I wanted to look at this proposal and couldn't find any maps. There's not a map in this packet. The first map I've seen is this one online. And as a recreationalist, I'm very interested in what happens along that stretch of Highway 1 because of the rec trail interface. I don't know if it accommodates or thwarts or anything. There was no map to look at. I don't know if Sierra Club looks at things from the recreationalist point of view, but I would like to look at it from the recreationalist point of view. There's a memorandum in this packet dated February 28th, 2013 from Steve Ensley to Rick Medina, senior planner. And I just want to read the last bit. Interested persons, agencies can access all documents which should have been included in the FORA consistency determination packages for City of Seaside Local Coastal Program on the city's website. Posted documents include, and then it's blank. So the public did not have a chance to review these documents, and I would like to postpone this decision until the public can have a chance to see what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Anyone else in the public?
Good evening. Diana Ingersoll with the City of Seaside, Deputy City Manager. I urge you to direct staff to keep in here the direction that the BRP land use concept ultimate development figure 3.3-1 be modified based on the fact that you find this consistent. I don't know anything else about the legalese regarding as with previous legislative consistency determination, but I definitely want you to put in here, not delete the whole sentence. You need to direct staff to make those changes because it designates land use. It designates CTC, the type of land use that makes our plan consistent. So I urge the board to put a language in there that does direct staff to modify this figure. Thank you.
Thank you. You may want to sit in the front row because we have questions for you, maybe. Anyone else in the public? Closing public comment, bring it back. Mr. Ensley, I was informed by the person to my right that you may be the one to respond to some of the comments.
Did I draw the wrong straw?
Yes, the short one.
I don't know the length of it, but yes.
The specific question that I was going to respond to had to do with just language suggested by the Sierra Club regarding the land use map. And, you know, we don't have any objection to their language. They're just
it becomes apparent that there should be some language making it very clear that when the board makes a consistency determination, that we can then go and update the maps and do all the clerical work that needs to be done. Otherwise, you would have a nonsensical situation where you do a consistency determination, but because you didn't leave a phrase in the resolution in the way in which somebody 10 years later might be comfortable with, that somehow an entitlement that you've given is no longer an entitlement. That's a nonsensical situation. I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but from a planning standpoint, a double jeopardy situation like that would not make any sense. So we thought it a good idea to add some language, but we're not wedded to any particular language. So whatever works for all of us, including the Sierra Club, would make sense.
Thank you, Steve, very much. Any board members, any comments?
Through the chair,
Ian?
you know, I wish the rest of the board was here, but and I support the Sierra Club, but we're going too far when our staff says whatever the Sierra Club is fine with, we fine with. It should be the board that makes the decision. If some other party is unhappy with it, then that's fine. We can debate it. But we cannot make sure that the language is good for them when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. We can't be doing the same thing. So something has to go on here. I don't know, why should we change the language? I haven't heard why the language that the staff agreed to 5 minutes ago with this recommendation, the representative from Seaside said they're comfortable with it. I don't understand, why do you change it? And then, so if we change it, then I have to go to the Seaside and ask them what repercussions are there if we do it that way. I didn't ask the question. So, but I do see where this sentence came from. At first, I didn't know why it was there. But this is what caught us up last time, right? We made a determination years ago, and then we checked the record, and there wasn't nothing in the record saying that it should be updated. It should be updated. And I think that's where we're going with the cemetery and other projects. Now, I know people are fighting things, and rightly so, but I see staff, I think I just heard staff say, we're only putting this in here, so when the record is checked, we authorize it to be consistent. So I would like, before people start saying, well, let's check with the Sierra Club, I want them to say, what is the problem with it? You know, not that they're uncomfortable, but how does it make it not work? Because this is not a project, this is just how we would go forward. So could we ask or figure out, why would this hurt what they're trying to do, the Sierra Club?
Any other board members? Mayor Rubio.
Yeah, I think the problem is with the first four or five words, as with previous legislative consistency determinations. Just strike that. Just finding is subsumed into and modifies a BRP land use concept ultimate development figure 3.3-1. If you take those 5 words out, the fight's over.
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
Second.
It's second by Mayor Burnett. So you're deleting as with previous consistency determinations?
Correct.
Okay. Any comments on the motion? Board Member Parker.
Thank you. I just would say that it's a personal thing, but because we haven't seen Seaside's local coastal plan, you know, I'm as described, it seems like a very sensible thing. But finding number 2, or you know, second paragraph on that same page, says that we have reviewed and considered. The board has reviewed and considered the forward-based reuse plan final environmental impact report. It's a question right there: how many have it and who's read it? But Seaside's environmental documentation. We haven't seen that, so it's just a little bit uncomfortable to be saying that we have done something that I haven't had a chance to do because the documents weren't included. But you know, I just want to raise that point. The other thing is that, again, in finding 4, what I would feel most comfortable with is the first sentence: the board finds that the LCP is consistent with a forward-based reuse plan, and then the final sentence, as Mayor Rubio edited it. I think we could be even simpler and just say staff is directed to amend the map accordingly. But all this stuff about the resource constrained and the jobs and housing is irrelevant to this action. So I would say, strike most of that and just have us say it's consistent and staff is directed to amend the map. If the maker of the motion is open to that suggestion.
And the maker is or is not.
Well, the resolution does include certain findings that need to be identified as per, the concerns that were brought up about whether or not it was consistent with certain programs or not. And these findings are very clear on describing those, whether it was a housing program or not. The question was asked whether it was or wasn't. And it has to be determined to be consistent with or not applicable. So, I'm not real comfortable with throwing out all the findings. I think that it gives value to the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members? All right, so the motion is to approve the resolution, striking out the words in the fourth paragraph, last sentence, the following words, as with previous legislative consistency determinations. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes. Thank you very much. No one opposed to it, no one abstained. We will now go to closing, we'll go to public comments, number 9. I apologize for the lateness, but please, if you're going to speak, come up, sit towards the front. You have a right to make comments on any matter within the jurisdiction of FORA, but not on this agenda. Please do so. You have a maximum of 3 minutes. Well, I can see that we're going to be making probably another motion around 6:46 or so. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Peterson. A few days ago, I had the opportunity to revisit Red Rock Canyon, which is a Bureau of Land Management preserve in southern Nevada. And judging from the license plates that were there, this is a small tourist magnet. And the reason I mention this is we have the opportunity to do something similar, supporting the Fort Ord National Monument. But we have to be careful. The area around Red Rock Canyon is basically in harmony with the area. It's ranches and developments that are consistent with a preserve that is essentially very, very gorgeous. And what we have to do is make sure that we don't negatively impact the National Monument with massive horse parks, gambling facilities, other ill-conceived developments. And if we do that, maybe we can outdo Red Rock Canyon. Thank you.
This was a much more joyous place last night. The flavors of marina, food, wine, and a good time with a lot of good people. Ron Cheshire. Because I wasn't inclined to run for a higher elected office, in 1997 I took a seat on the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board that had been in existence for almost 20 years. I had a lot of catching up to do. Anybody that's a new board member has a lot of catching up to do. Okay, Ron Cheshire, Monterey Santa Cruz Building Trades Council. Twice you've given developers a break. You've lowered developers' fees and actually set a policy which makes things consistent and predictable in regards to the formulaic approach. But we keep hearing the buzz back behind us. Developer drops Cypress Knolls, January 29th, Monterey Herald. Because it just cost too much to pay those workers. I'm going to be at the Prevailing Wage Forum on the 2nd and 3rd, all 2 days of it. And I would certainly like to see an agenda as soon as possible my anxiety rate went up a little bit when I heard that all elements pertaining to prevailing wage will be discussed. The workers of this area and this community passed their first, FORA passed the first ordinance, including prevailing wages, so workers, businesses would have a level playing field at competing for the jobs that would be created if there's ever any development around here. We want to provide opportunities for displaced workers. I think you hear Yvonne talk about that a lot. Those opportunities aren't going to happen if you don't set a standard. If you don't have a standard in the community, then just anyone can come in here and use labor, drive down the price to try and get the job and take the job away from the local people. So, I'm looking forward to whatever the agenda is so I don't get all pushed out of shape. Lastly, I have a question for legal counsel. If FORA had a beef with the Carpenters Union, I would think that Mr. Rubio would recuse himself from any discussion or action. The Sierra Club has a beef with FORA. How many Sierra Club members are on the board? And should they recuse themselves? Thank you.
Thank you. Before you begin, please.
I move that we extend the meeting until 7 o'clock or the culmination of public comment, whichever occurs first.
You read my mind. Thank you. Any comments on that? Out to public, back from the public, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Stay awake, David. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cesar Lara with the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council. We represent 64 different unions in Monterey and Santa Cruz County with about 35,000 union members in the area. And a responsibility beyond the union members that we represent, we want to be the strongest voice for working families in the area. And my colleague from the building trades I know was going to speak today, and I said, I'll come, even though I try and come to as few forum meetings as possible, because I always walk away with a bad gut feeling in my stomach and sad for democracy at times. But I grew up here, and many of my union members grew up here. I was here when the base was open. I had family members that used the base for jobs. I had family members who were deployed from here and lost family in Vietnam out of here. It's concerning that when the base closed down, it was a discussion about replacing, not building, but replacing the jobs and the economic engine. And back then, 2/3 of the base would be stayed open for environmental parks. I love parks. Now national monuments. And 1/3 will be developed for jobs, for job creation. My colleague came up here for the jobs in the building trades. That was the first step. And then it's the jobs that are going to be housed in those buildings and the homes that we built and the communities that will be built. Actions today to fight about whether or not to have workforce housing and jobs makes me sad, because we're at square one, it feels like. And we got to move forward, and we have to remember of the promises that were made on this and the jobs that were lost. And I try and come here as few as possible. I think last time was about 4 years ago. You'll probably see me in about 4 years again. But always remember that as servants in the community, that we have to remember that. And other organizations that come up here for their goals and their interest, it's the workers and it's the future of our county. There's only few open lands. This is a gateway between Marina and Seaside. Let's do something with it. Let's create the jobs. Let's do the economic engine. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening now. Jason Campbell, a resident of Seaside. Thank you for staying late, those of you who did. I really appreciate that. I know it can be frustrating coming out here and spending this much time here. It is from my perspective as well. But I'm going to state the obvious here. You realize how much time is spent fixing mistakes. It's something to really think about, and it's, let alone the resources and credibility that are at stake. But the thing that really bugs me is how much this costs the taxpayers. For everybody to stay late, to have counsel, to go to court, to all that, I really wish we could make a double our efforts to do this right in the first place. The one thing that was addressed tonight was kind of a mix of input that said we're not really sure why this language was changed, but it could be changed because of a letter or someone else. I think that's actually a dangerous place, because what it does by...
Excuse me, Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
This is comments that are not on matters that are on the agenda, and you're starting to refer to a matter that is on the agenda.
Okay, well, it's okay. It's about input, and I'm questioning about who does the input, and it kind of grants anonymity if you don't cite a source, and if you say it's just a general idea or a bunch of people, and which brings me to my concern about public comments. I was curious why public comment got put to the end. I mean, it does, as I believe it's Lamont who spoke earlier, who said it makes it really difficult for the public to be heard, because here we are talking to a half-empty room. So that was changed. I don't know why or by whom. And the changes, if you're going to change it, I wish it would make a little more sense, because it says, just narrow this down, within the jurisdiction of FORA, but not on this agenda, may do so during the public comment. I'm not sure if it's not on the agenda, that kind of implies that you would be able to speak to it when it comes up on the agenda, but there are several items tonight that the public was not invited to speak on when it came up on the agenda. For example, the re-vote on the electoral the member at large. Seems like with old business, I've heard it happen before. We talked about it last week. We're gonna vote again this week. It's on the agenda, but the public is not invited. So I don't know how you would clarify that. You don't have to take that up tonight, obviously, but you should clarify when the proper time to speak on the items that are on the agenda, but you're not opening it up to public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Very briefly, as to Mr. Campbell's comment, one of the reasons it was moved to the end was hopefully that as we went through the agenda, several questions that you may have that you would have brought up would have been covered in the agenda items, so as to reduce some questions you may have which you consider to be something that's not on the agenda. But if there's Authority Council could address how it resulted in being at the end of the agenda? Or Executive Officer?
The answer to that is that the Executive Committee recommended and the Board agreed to move public comment period to the end of the agenda. And as to the comment about the election not inviting public comment, time to talk about that election was when the election was first heard. That portion of the prior meeting was continued to this meeting. Public testimony was taken on that item. It just wasn't taken tonight because it was a continued item from a prior meeting where public testimony was given.
Thank you.
Through the chair, before you close,
Yes,
I do think we need to clarify going forward the second vote, and that it's nothing we make up on the fly. I guess that's in our authority, not authority, but in our governing authority.
It's in the master resolution.
That's what I mean. So maybe we could just next time bring that forward to the public or put something in the agenda, because that was the question. It was a question why we're just going straight to the vote. It's because it's a second vote, not because it's the second time around. It's the second vote.
Thank you. Personally, I think that it should be open again to public comment, but I'm probably not the majority in that. But public comments have been closed. We will adjourn this meeting in memory of Santa Cruz police officers Butch Baker and Elizabeth Butler. Please remember them in your prayers and their family members. Thank you very much for coming and staying so late.